YSL day 147 here on the Outcast podcast. As you know, yesterday was a very rough day for the state. The state lost their witness, former Atlanta Police Department Detective Dennis. He revealed on the stand that Yak had just gotten out of prison. During his testimony, the defense called for a mistrial. Of course, Judge Whitaker, in her glory, there decided that no, I'm not going to give you a mistrial because it's in the indictment, but he can't testify anymore at all the rest of this trial. So that turned out to cause the state to lose all the evidence that he put in, all of his testimony, everything. They lost that yesterday. Please like and subscribe to the video as we sit here and wait for court to start on the Outcast podcast on YouTube and Twitch.
Yes, so we've got Suri Chada here for Mr. Nichols today. That's C-H-A-D-A, is that right? S-U-R-I?
C-H-A-D-H-A.
Sorry.
N-E-Z.
Okay, good. Anybody else?
The full name is Surinder Chada Jimenez. That's S-U-R-I-N-D-E-R C-H-A-D-H-A-J-I-M-E-N-E-Z. Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning. There was a motion for reconsideration filed by the state yesterday afternoon. Could the defense file whatever response they want to file before Monday at 8?
Good morning, Your Honor.
Morning.
I could do that, or we can just argue it now. I think the state's cases and facts are not lined up with the reality of what happened in our case, and I don't believe that. I think it's specious. So I don't think, if you want, I can respond in writing, but I don't believe that the state's motion in any way should affect our time in this case, and we should move forward. And that's my position. I put it in writing, but.
All right. Well, what I'd like is if there are any post new evidence code cases with similar facts to ours. So I'd rather have something in writing if y'all don't mind.
I will, but there's a ton of
All right. Well,
cases.
you don't have to give me every one. Just.
So the state is wrong.
Okay, I don't want to argue it right now. I want a written response. All right, appreciate it.
Your Honor, may
Yes.
we approach about another matter?
Yes. So, hello, Mr. Armstrong. I suspect that's why you're here, but can you come back on Monday instead?
Absolutely.
Thank you. It seems to be going in and out.
All right, let's see. We got something going on here now. Already at the sidebar. Don't know what's going on, but hey, it is what it is. Go ahead and like the video there and subscribe and hit that bell. I put out content daily on YouTube. I put it out daily on Twitch. I also put it out on TikTok, Outcast podcast on TikTok. We're really going to start picking up on them. I finally got my live access to TikTok off my computer, so it's a little bit easier to do things there now. This is the YSL trial, day 147. Already trying. The state's already trying to get a reconsideration. I guess they're trying to get it on Davis, trying to get all of his testimony and all of that evidence back because they lost all of that. And if he's the only one they can get it in through, then they've lost all of it. That's probably what that motion for reconsideration is. And I personally think the judge should have just sit right there on the stand and said, "Hey, denied," and moved on. Or either said, "Hey, I can grant this and give you a mistrial. Which one do you want? You want me to declare a mistrial and give you this motion, or do you want to lose that witness and keep going? What do you want to do?" Good morning, everybody. Court's in sidebar right now. We're just waiting for him to come out. Oh, sidebar. I'll give you 1 second here. But that's the only thing we're waiting. Ah, crap, I was trying to log into something and I just messed up. Hit the wrong button. We're waiting on this bench sidebar to be done. The state filed some kind of a motion. I'm not sure what they filed yet, and they're not going to argue it till Monday. She's going to give the state, the defense, a chance to file a motion in response to what the state has just filed. I'm pretty sure they probably filed something in the lines of getting reconsideration on losing Dennis yesterday, and all of the evidence, all of the exhibits, all of his testimony, everything just pretty much got taken away from him yesterday because of what he did. But we're just sitting here waiting on the sidebar to end. Right here on the Outcast Podcast. trying to get my Twitch feed, my TikTok feed up and going here too. It's been one of them days trying to get everything together. Running behind this morning. All right, here we go. Now let me get into. All right, that's exactly what I wanted, but which one is it picking up on? Pick it up on this one. Yeah, it's picking up on that one, and that's not the one I needed to pick up on. All right. I needed to pick up on this one here, and move this over here. Oh, wait a minute. Hi. Outcast Podcast live here on TikTok, YouTube, Twitch. Good morning, everybody. YSL Day 147. Not really sure what's going on here. You know, this has been a fairly long bench conference first thing in the morning. I mean, there's no jury, but we're going straight to the sidewalk. Good morning, everybody. We're just waiting on court to start. I'm going to go full screen in just a few minutes. As soon as court starts back up, I'll put this full screen for everybody to see. Good morning. Welcome to the Outcast Podcast, YSL, day 147. If you missed yesterday, boy, yesterday was a big time, hard day for the state. They lost one of their witnesses, Mr. Dennis, former Detective Dennis for the Atlanta Police Department. He said something on the stand that he shouldn't have said, and it cost him. He will not be allowed to testify the rest of the trial. All this testimony from yesterday was stricken from the record. First thing this morning, the state put in they did it yesterday afternoon. They put in um, a motion for reconsideration, so they're trying to get him back, and I don't think it's going to happen. We'll go full screen here in just a few moments. As soon as court starts back up, I'll take this to full screen so you won't see all the graphics that I have for everybody else. All you will see is the actual trial. If you'd like to see the graphics and everything else, you can join me on my YouTube or my Twitch. I'm gonna go full screen here in just a minute, and we'll get everything rocking and rolling. Matter of fact, let's go ahead and go. Well, I could have full screen. Let's figure out how to best way to do this. Let's see, it's right here. Let's take y'all full screen here. All right, let me see what that did for you guys. Okay, so y'all are still catching this one. I need to get y'all the other one. Well, I can go full screen with this one for now. There we go. Okay. Huh. You're gonna buffer first thing this morning? Come on, long crime, get your stuff together. Give me 1 second there. I'm having to restart the feed here from Law and Crime. They've had some hard times here the last couple of days. You've really been able to do it too well. All right, we're back. Let's see. Get everything back now, but TikTok's the only one having issues. Everybody else is. You know, looks like we might be there. Give me 1 second, y'all. I am going to change something over here real quick. Give me 1 second. This has been a long bench conference, first thing in the morning, gracious thou. We haven't even started court. I don't know what they're doing. Let me restart. I'm gonna just kind of do this real quick, just make sure that I'm not missing something. No? Huh. Let me check another. All right, let's see here.
He's a big guy. So,
All right, we're still waiting on the court to start this morning. They are apparently got something going this morning. Matt Sharp asked for a sidebar, and they're still in the sidebar. So I'm just waiting to see what's going to happen. This is Outcast Podcast on Twitch and YouTube. We're going to be coming to you live today, throughout the day, and we're going to be doing a recap tonight on YSL. I'm going to be putting it together after the court gets done. The court's done at 4 o'clock today. The juror has got to go out of town for a funeral. So they're going to stop court at 4 o'clock today. Please like and subscribe. Help me grow this channel. And we are just sitting here waiting. Like I said, yesterday was a very interesting day. There is a motion for reconsideration out there from the state. They brought in one of the big guns on in for argument. I think they're trying to get Detective Dennis's testimony back in, his exhibits back in. I believe that same. Here's what I think should happen on that. I think Whitaker should say, "Okay, I'll give you everything with Dennis back, and we'll just clear mistrial, and it'll be over." This thing should have been over, in my personal opinion. But it is what it is. It be what it be. Ain't a whole lot I can do about it. I don't agree with it, but it is what it is. All right. All right, we're still waiting on this sidebar. The motion, I was watching another person, and the motion for reconsideration is to get him back. They want the Dennis back from yesterday. They said the sanction was too harsh. I think she should have declared a mistrial myself, but I'm pretty sure the state probably told him to say that, trying to get that out there because they're playing dirty because they know they're losing. They've lost the jury already. They lost the jury the other day when the guy on the stand said, "Oh, are they done threatening to arrest me now for not testifying?" And blah blah blah. I see that. That should have been a mistrial right there. But anyway,
I wonder, maybe there's like
this is just taking a long time. I'm not sure what's going on here. It must be something major for it to start and then to go into a sidebar and then not come out. Okay, so Twitter feed. Thank you for Twitter. There is a conflict of interest with the stand-in attorney for Harvey. They're trying to find someone else to stand in for him. His conflict is too much, and he cannot stand in for Mr. Harvey in the Harvey rule. So they are out looking for a new attorney to represent Mr. Harvey's client.
motion. You want to
All right, we're still waiting on them to find somebody to replace that lawyer that has the conflict of interest that was going to be sending in for Mr. Harvey, who apparently is sick right now. This is the YSL case, day 147 here on the Outcast Podcast on YouTube and Twitch. We're still waiting on them to find a replacement lawyer. Court's going to end at 4 o'clock today. One of the jurors has a funeral they have to fly out of town for, so it's not going to be a full day today. We'll see what's going on. Here is the Outcast Podcast.
Stressed out. I feel like I'm stressed. And then, in the RICO, testimony for Mr. Jerry. So I don't know. So you did miss that.
All right, so for this morning's representation of, I'm on. Of Mr. Nichols, we have Miss Foster and Miss Anderson. Thank you. All right, and somebody said there was something they wanted to put on the record before we started.
Yes, Your Honor. So, in one of, and it's not being published today, but I had very fruitful conversations with Mr. Atkins and Mr. Abate. There is, in one of my clients' phone calls, there is a comment where he says, I just went to court and they let everything out. F him, in the context, it's D, Woody, and the other D. In that context, he just came back from a prelim. So to someone that's not a lawyer that practices in Fulton County, you would get the impression that Woody and D and the other D let everything out in court, when I think it's pretty clear he's referring to the detectives the detective that testified at the prelim.
Okay.
So we're going to work on a stipulation that lets the jury know that a detective testified at a prelim on that date to add context to that
Okay.
that statement,
That-
if it makes sense. Because
that's-
otherwise, I would have a 403 misleading objection.
Okay. All right. Anything else before we get the jury in? All right. Let's get the jury in and y'all can go ahead and be having your next witness make their way in. Yep. Yeah. All right, thank you very much. Everybody can be seated, and I see we have Mr. Sprinkle back on the stand. Mr. Sprinkle, I'll just remind you that you are still under oath. Go ahead, Mr. Abadi.
Thank you, Judge. Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Sprinkle.
Good morning. How are you?
Good, thank you. Can you tell the jurors, I know you have previously testified, and I know you spoke briefly about the fact that you had reviewed.
Excuse me, Mr. Abadi. I'm sorry. Could you use the mic? Please?
Yes, I apologize.
Thank you.
And if you want to move around, that's fine. There's a lapel mic somewhere if you'd prefer to use that, or you can hold one of those mics.
I hate the sound of my own voice, so the lapel mic really bothers me.
Okay.
So, Mr. Sprinkle, so you talked a little bit about the fact last time that you had, I guess, reviewed and gone through some jail calls as it related to the case involving the murder of Donovan Thomas. Do you remember that?
I do.
Okay, so I want to kind of start there and follow up a little bit about how you do that and what system you use.
Okay.
So could you tell me a little bit about the system that you utilize or are able to use in order to preview or listen to jail calls?
Well, in this case, the system would have been Securus. Securus is a private corporation based out of Dallas, Texas. At the time, at the time that's relevant here, they maintained the phones and the tablets that were issued to inmates, with which the inmates were able to place phone calls. And now it's another company, but that's not relevant for our purposes. At the time, the short answer to your question is it was Securus was the system.
Okay, and were you trained in using the secure system, and is it something that you use regularly as a part of your job roles and responsibilities?
Yes.
And can you tell the jurors when a call is made from the jail, is that call or is every call that's not to a privileged or is not a privileged conversation recorded?
Yes, it's an automated system, or it was, and well, it still is, but it's computers essentially automatically record the phone calls. They're voice over IP phone calls. So barring some sort of malfunction in the system, of which I've not seen with the secure call platform, all calls are automatically recorded. There's no human input needed to ensure the call is recorded. It's a computer program.
And can you tell the jurors when a call, I guess when an inmate at the Fulton County Jail is making a phone call, can you tell the jurors a little bit about the recording that plays before the call is connected?
Well, over time, the recording has changed a little bit, but one thing that is consistent is that the recording, it's an automated recording, and both parties to the conversation are advised that the conversation is may be monitored, and it will definitely be recorded.
And can you tell the jurors, are, I guess, each call, I guess, made by an inmate, are they stored then after the call is completed?
They're digital recordings. They're stored on a server.
And is that by the company that you've referred to as Securus, at least back in 2015 and 17 and 18?
Yeah, it's a server that Securus either owns or leases. It's some sort of server that was for Securus's use.
And based on your training, knowledge, and experience with Securus, are those calls then stored in the regular course of business?
They are.
And can you tell the jurors how members of the district attorney's office or law enforcement have access to the recorded jail calls by different inmates?
It's a website, commandcenter.securustech.net to be exact. And I have a login and password. It's a derivative of my first name and my first initial and last name. And on logging in, there's a array of things from which I can choose. And one of them is just a search form where I input various values like phone number, date range, inmate name, inmate account number, et cetera. And based on those values that I enter into the search form, I can look for the jail calls that look for certain jail calls that meet those criteria.
Okay, and the login that you just described, is that unique to just you as the user?
Yes.
And when you are, in order to log in with your login, you have to, I guess, use a password.
I do.
And once you are able to log into the secure system, can you tell the jurors, I know you referenced searching for calls, and we'll get to there in a second, but if there's a call that you listen to and is of interest to you, are you able to then download that call?
Yes, I may.
And can you tell the jurors how, I guess, you are able to download calls that you intercept or that you listen to that are of interest to whatever you're working or investigating?
There's a variety of ways, but as I testified previously, they're just digital calls. They're either in MP3 format or WAV format, and I just ask the web-based software or the web-based platform to essentially compile the calls that I've selected for me, and I select a button to download them. And generally, there's multiple ways to do it, but the most common that I utilized with Securus was I would designate the calls I desire to download, essentially hit download, and then I'd get an email and that with a link that I would then download the calls and in what was an ISO format, which is essentially a zip file. And that would be how I would preserve the calls and place them in the case file.
And can you tell the jurors with the ISO format that you just described, can that format be altered or I guess changed in any way by you?
Well, no, not the ISO that I download from Securus. I'm not sure. There probably would be a way that somebody, if they wanted to be nefarious, would be able to unpack the contents of the ISO and then repack them. But I mean, I didn't do that in this case.
Okay. And can you explain a little bit to the jurors how an inmate who is in the Fulton County Jail is able to utilize the secure system and make jail phone calls?
They enter in their account number followed by a PIN, and then they put the phone number, and I'm not sure if it's in this exact order, but they, in order to place the call, they enter in their account number, then a PIN, unless they're in the booking area or the lobby area. And that's essentially it. They enter in some numeric credentials.
Okay. And you talked a little bit about searching for calls. Can you explain to the jurors the different ways in which you search for calls that you're looking that it could be relevant to your investigation?
Sure. I search either by phone numbers, if there's phone numbers that I desire to find calls on, and oftentimes I'll do that if I think that there's multiple people that are calling a certain number, I think that there's a certain phone number that the certain inmate may be utilizing another person's credentials to call. Then I'll search by phone number only. I can also search by the inmate's account. So all calls placed from the inmate's account. And those are the two primary ways. There's also ways that you can search on all calls from a certain area of the jail. Like if I wanted to pull all calls from the booking area during a certain date and time, I could do that as well. But for the most part, on doing searches, I guess I'll speak in the past tense since Securus is no longer the system that is utilized by the Fulton County Jail. I would just run phone searches by either the inmate's account or phone number.
Okay. And if you'll do us a favor, I think Madam Court Reporter's fingers are going to break. So could you just slow down just a little bit when you're talking?
Yes.
Okay. Now, can you tell, I know you explained to the jurors when you testified previously about a number that you located after you reviewed call detail records. It was a number that you found in common with all those records. Do you remember talking about that?
I did.
Okay. And do you remember telling the jurors that the number through your investigation and through... I'm just trying to set...
I'm going to give him a little leeway on that.
Do you remember that you testified that through your investigation and after receiving the call detail records, that phone number belonged to Mr. Bradford?
I do.
Okay, and can you tell the jurors how you utilized that phone number that you found in common as it relates to the jail calls and the jail phone call system?
Well, so as I started to review the case, I found that the phone number 404-957-8008 could be found as a contacted number or a number that was contacted. It appeared in the phone logs of the records for Darius Zachary, Demise McMullen, Kenneth Copeland, and Kelvin Treadwell during the relevant time frame that I was looking at. And so if on seeing that, common sense dictates this is whoever has this number, somebody that those 4 people know, or those handsets that contacted that number were nevertheless in the hands of somebody that knew that person. It was a number of interests, basically. So I ran 404-957-8008 through the Fulton County Jail call system to find any calls that were placed by anyone at the Fulton County Jail, anybody who was incarcerated at the Fulton.
And when you did that, did you locate any calls that were relevant or of interest to your work on this case involving the death of Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
And can you tell the jurors the PIN that you located as it relates to these calls, who was the inmate in which the PIN was assigned to?
Are you asking me which inmate placed the calls?
Yes, which PIN number, yes, which inmate who is, I guess, attached to the PIN placed the calls?
It was Martinez Arnold.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors how many calls did you download any calls as it relates to inmate Martinez Arnold's PIN number?
Yes.
And how many?
I don't recall how many.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors, were there any, I guess, how many specific calls did you listen to and that you determined were relevant as it relates to your investigation?
There to 404-957-8008.
Yes.
Well, there were 2 that were particularly relevant, two that were particularly relevant, and then there was a third that was also relevant, but there were 2 that particularly piqued my interest.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors the 2 calls that you located that were relevant to what you were investigating, what dates were those calls placed?
January 10th, 2015.
And what time were both of those calls placed?
They're within an hour following the homicide.
Okay. And after finding those calls and listening to those calls, did you download them as you described earlier here before the jury?
I did.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors, as you continue to investigate this case, did you search, I guess, for any other calls related to Mr. Shannon Jackson or Shannon Stillwell?
I did.
And can you tell the jurors, were you able to locate calls in which Mr. Jackson's PIN number was being used to place calls?
Yes.
And can you tell the jurors how many calls, if you can recall, did you listen to and download as it relates to your investigation?
Well, as far as the number of calls I downloaded, it was over 700. As far as the number of calls I listened to, that I don't recall. I don't remember.
And can you tell the jurors when you download a large number of calls, like you just described, 700, explain to the jurors how you kind of narrow your search as it relates to such a large number of phone calls?
Well, there's a number of things that I do. For one thing that I do is I try to anticipate when someone may say something that would be relevant to me. If it's the call was placed at around the time of an event that would yield a relevant topic, such as, for example, calls made right after the arrest in the booking area, calls made right after a hearing where the case was discussed necessarily, that I would anticipate that perhaps the inmate would just like to discuss what happened that day with whomever they called. I also look for calls to numbers that aren't contacted very often, thinking that perhaps that indicates there's been some sort of, that this is, if it's somebody that's not called very often, then the discussion may not be as mundane as it would be with someone that they speak to 5 times a day. And that's pretty much it.
And you, when you talk about hearings or things of that nature, is a prelim, for example, a type of hearing that you would use as a date for potential calls of interest?
Yes.
Okay. And is that something that you utilized in this case as it relates to phone calls that Mr. Jackson made?
I did.
And can you tell the jurors very briefly, at a prelim, is that a type of hearing in which the detective, typically the lead detective, is the only person who testifies about the facts and circumstances of the case during that hearing?
Generally, yes. It's hearsay is permitted, so generally that's the only witness that would testify at a preliminary hearing, rather.
In your experience, as it relates to phone calls that you pull after the date of a prelim, is it common for you to find calls in which the inmate is describing what happened during the prelim and the facts and the circumstances that the detective may have testified about?
Yes, it's very.
And is that something that occurred here, in this case, as it relates to Mr. Jackson after you pulled calls on November 19th of 2015?
Yes.
Okay. Now, specifically, did you also pull calls that relates to Mr. Kendrick?
I did.
And can you tell the jurors, did you utilize the same procedures you kind of just described to the jury when talking about the calls that you pulled and reviewed for Mr. Jackson?
I did.
And I want to show you State's Exhibit. This 590Y. Yes. Mr. Sprinkle, I apologize. Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
And Mr. Sprinkle, do you recognize the exhibit 590Y?
I do.
And can you tell the jurors how you recognize 590Y?
Was my handwriting on the disc. I created yesterday. It's a selection of jail calls that I downloaded and listened to, and I put them on this disc so that they would be in tangible form for purposes of creating an exhibit.
Okay, and can you tell the jurors the jail calls that you've described that are on that disc, are those the jail calls that you have talked about today as it relates to Mr. Arnold, Mr. Jackson, and Mr. Kendrick?
Yes.
And you said you created the disc?
I did.
And can you tell the jurors, are the calls a fair and accurate depiction of the phone calls you listened to that you've described before this jury here today?
Yes.
At this time, Your Honor, the state would tender what's been marked as State's Exhibit 590Y into evidence.
Your Honor, just reasserting the prior objections that were made, I guess, a week or
Understood.
two ago. Thank you.
Those are admitted. Any objections are preserved.
And Your Honor, permission to publish.
You may.
Just for court's edification, counsel, and the jury. I'm not going to play all the calls today, just a very small selection.
Okay.
And while Mr. Atkins is pulling that up, for the record, for counsel, the court, and for the jury, this is a call that took place on November 19th, 2015, as it relates to Mr. Shannon Jackson.
Securus, you may start the conversation now.
Hello. When I was crying, the tears was on the screen and kept pressing phone, so I hung up by itself. I asked the phone, but they kept pressing phone. Yeah, I'm gonna just wrote me said D said what's your number.
Fuck D, bro. Fuck them nigga, bro. Oh, just like that, bro. Fuck you. Straight up, bro. All that fake friend shit. Go fuck these folks. Wish I get on tour. Fuck all that pussy ass nigga. I wish I get on tour. All these fuck niggas. Fuck all y'all rat ass niggas, man. Fuck that nigga, man.
I didn't know with D on the phone. He said, "What happened to the SB in court because they dismissed Monk from charge? They didn't even take on the court."
That fuck nigga, you know what's going on. Pussy ass nigga.
Say it like that.
You know fuck.
Okay.
Fuck you.
Okay. I said, "Fuck D." He, when he talked to the attorney.
I haven't heard anything on this call that even makes this call justifiable. What is going on here?
I got all niggas got, bro.
I just said, she just read it. She looked like she wanted it.
You text me over your number?
Huh?
I don't got your number.
You know, I didn't have my number when you said, what you say? Some old shit now. Wait, what happened to baby?
That fuck nigga rat. They just went till I had went to court and they just let everything out. Tell that fuck nigga. I don't keep going with folks. That fuck nigga know what's going on. Bitch, you in love with a rat hoe. Everything that came out. The shit they bring up, bro, that shit was just weak as fuck, bro. I'm talking about
Well, do not leave her in here. This is not the time right now. Everybody get out. Everybody get out. Mom, can you get out too? Shut though. I don't know, call the
Useless
phone.
phone call. Useless. What the hell? This is so freaking useless. What are we doing?
Trying to keep your head up here, real one for real.
That's all you hear. Oh, yeah, real. Man, that shit don't do nothing for a nigga. That shit don't make a nigga feel good. That shit don't do nothing for a nigga.
How are we doing?
I really get out this house.
Oh, yeah. Talking about a do-what name, nut name, yet name. Okay, yeah.
Give that shit a name too.
Again, but this makes absolutely no sense. This is stupid. That's just my opinion, but this is stupid. But hey now, how's everybody doing today on this lovely Friday of wasted time again by the state of Georgia in this YSL RICO trial?
Oh, man. My head hurt, man.
I'm going to stop it there for the record. There's 41 seconds left in the call from November 19th, 2015. Mr. Sprinkle, are there 9 calls as it relates to Mr. Jackson on States Exhibit 590Y?
Yeah, 9, that sounds about right.
And as it relates to Mr. Arnold, are there 4 calls that were pulled that you downloaded on States Exhibit 590Y?
That sounds right, yeah.
And then as it relates to Mr. Kendrick, as we spoke earlier, are there 3 calls on 590Y as it relates to him?
Yeah, I think so. I think that all those numbers sound correct.
And when you, I guess, are listening to the phone calls from your computer, is the sound system a little better than what we have here in the great courtroom here in Fulton County?
Yes. So sometimes with jail calls, they've split the inmate side of the call. I don't know if that's what was happening here, but generally that's what happens. They split the inmate side of the call in one, like the right channel or the left channel, whichever one, and then the called party side and the other channel, so they're in stereo. And for whatever reason, the inmate channel is sometimes a lot lower than the called party channel. It sounds like that may have been what was happening just then, because I too was having difficulty hearing.
And for the court, for counsel, and for the jury, the state's going to play the rest of the calls at a different time when we can utilize a better sound system. That
Okay, yeah, because
we were all struggling, I
I'm
think.
not sure anybody heard anything.
Now, Mr. Sprigg, I just want to ask you a couple questions about that call. As it relates to your investigation, was someone with the nickname Little Woody someone you investigated and was a part of this case?
Yes.
And did you hear his name during that call?
Yes.
And did you also hear Mr. Jackson reference doo-wop, nard, and yak?
I did. I heard that part, yeah.
And were those individuals that you also, through your investigation, I guess, were familiar with?
Yes.
Okay. Now, Can you tell the jurors the nickname Little Woody? Who do you know that nickname to belong to?
Kenneth Copeland.
Okay. And when you received the case file from the Atlanta Police Department, were there a number of recorded statements or interviews inside of the file?
There was.
And when you received it, and as you continued to work on the case, did you review those statements?
I did.
And did you receive a statement as it relates to Kenneth Copeland from June 10th of 2015?
I did.
And can you tell the jurors, did you review it in its full?
I did.
Okay. Now, during that statement, does Mr. Copeland provide his phone number as well as the phone number for his girlfriend?
I believe so, yes.
And can you tell the jurors what is Mr. Copeland's girlfriend's name?
Deshaun Quarterman.
Okay. And after receiving through the interview as well as other means through your investigation, did you request the phone records and receive them for Kenneth Copeland?
Well, by request, I didn't order his phone records. Someone with the Atlanta Police Department did, but I did review them.
Okay. And is it something that you reviewed as a part of this case?
Yes.
And this was previously admitted into evidence at State's Exhibit 533YA.
Let's waste some more time here. Something we've already admitted. Waste 403, 403, 403. Need a 403 button.
All right. Yes. Okay. Now, can you tell the juror what was the phone number in the records that were related to the handset that was associated with Kenneth Copeland?
What was Kenneth Copeland's phone number?
Correct.
678-278-5991.
Okay. And after listening to the June 10th of 2015 statement with Mr. Copeland.
Hang on just a second. I know that stand isn't great, but I think the jurors in the back row are having a hard time seeing that.
And Mr. Sprinkle, while Mr. Atkins is putting up the board, can you tell the jurors, did you review Mr. Copeland's phone records in light of the statement from June 10th of 2015 that you listened to?
Yes.
And can you tell the jurors, when did, I guess, activity on Mr. Copeland's phone or through his phone records, when did it begin in the early evening of June 10th of 2015?
Well, I guess it would depend on what you define as early evening. For me, I started inspecting the records as at 6:20 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Okay, and can you tell the jurors, was that an incoming or outgoing call?
His girlfriend, Deshaun Quarterman, called him at 6:20.
Okay, and did Mr. Copeland?
Simply, who called? I understand the handsets.
Sustained.
Okay, did the handset of Mr. Copeland's girlfriend call the handset related or associated with Mr. Copeland?
Yes.
And did Mr. Copeland's telephone, the number that was associated with him, did he answer?
He did not at 6:20 p.m.
Okay. Can you tell the jurors when was the next, I guess, incoming or outgoing call that Mr. Copeland made and was connected or answered?
Well, his brother called him at 6:27 p.m.
Object to
Did the handset related to Mr. Copeland's brother call the handset related to Kenneth Copeland?
Yes.
Okay. And did Mr. Copeland's handset telephone that's associated with him, did he pick up?
Well,
Yes,
it
another
appears
night,
that he
like,
did. It was a
got out of bed and
24-second
was at the door
conversation.
waiting,
Okay.
wanting to go to the
And,
bathroom. He had gotten
Do
off
you
the bed.
recall during the interview that Mr. Copeland did on June 10th of 2015, what he described as it related to his activity in the early evening?
He said that he was at his house at 178 Maury Avenue. He'd been taking a midday nap at the time.
Okay. And did he indicate during that interview that when he, I guess, woke up, he called the handset that was associated with his girlfriend, Miss Quarterman?
He did.
And is that consistent with what the cell phone records, the call logs for the handset, Mr. Copeland, that you reviewed?
Your Honor,
Yes.
I'm going to object at this point. I believe this is cumulative to the information elicited from Mr. Burney by Mr. Atkins last week. The cell records, the calls, the timing of the calls.
So my response would be Mr. Burney, or Agent Burney, as he testified, he didn't review any sort of statements, so he was not in a position to talk about the consistency of the statement as it relates to the records, which was the necessity. The whole reason we needed to call Mr. Sprinkle back was due to that unfortunate scheduling issue.
All right, I'm gonna,
And Your Honor, I believe those would be juror issues. I don't believe it's Mr. Sprinkle's place to determine what is consistent and what's not.
Well, I'd also say this goes to Mr. Copeland was impeached on multiple occasions by multiple parties before this court and this jury, and this is a prior consistent statements and activity as it relates to his impeachment.
I'm gonna overrule the objection.
You can answer the question. Let me ask it again.
Yes.
What Mr. Copeland, I guess, described during his interview as it relates to waking up and his phone activity to the detectives on June 10th of 2015, is that consistent with the activity that you reviewed and you've described here today as it relates to the handset of Mr. Copeland and his call log detail records?
Well, he called the handset associated with Deshaun Quarterman at 6:58 p.m. So that was consistent with him talking about what he did after his midday nap.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors, did you also, as a part of your investigation, plot different calls as it related to the call detail records that you received with Mr. Copeland?
I did.
Okay. If you also had an opportunity to review similar, I guess, plotting of Special Agent Burney?
I did.
Okay. Now, during the interview that day on June 10th of 2015, do you recall where Mr. Copeland described, I guess, he went next as it relates to his activities that night?
He went to the Green Store, which is, I believe, at 322 Glen Street. That's what he said, yeah.
And in your review of Mr. Copeland's records, can you tell the jurors, were his records consistent with him going to the Green Store shortly after he called the handset related to or associated with Ms. Quarterman?
Your Honor, I think that this is out of Mr. Sprinkle's expertise, and these are questions for Agent Burney, which have been asked.
Okay, so if that may be true, if I'm understanding what it is that Mr. Sprinkle's testifying to.
I can lay a foundation.
Okay.
Mr. Sprinkle, do you utilize or do you review call detail records on a regular basis as a part of your job responsibilities and duties with the District Attorney's Office?
Yes.
And can you tell the jurors how often do you do that?
Multiple times a week. I don't want to go so far as to say every day. I'm sure there's days that I haven't, but it's thousands upon thousands of times, thousands of sets of phone record. At least over 1,500 sets of phone records, and that's a conservative estimate. So yeah, I look at phone records all the time and have been doing so since 2012.
And in the phone records, or in many of the phone records or the call detail records that you receive,
If
do
we just
they
have
have
a guy here the other
longitude
day
and
talking about
latitude
cell
or
phones,
cell site location
what the
data
hell?
related to the different phone calls within the call detail records?
This is all,
Yes, it's
this is
depending on
stupidity
the
at the
type
biggest
of phone logs, call detail records that I have or that they are. Yes, they will sometimes have
Here's our
cell
judge,
site
every
location
umbrella, set of balls,
information.
And can you tell the jurors as a part of
enough is enough.
your
This case is over.
job
This trial is over.
responsibilities
Trial
and duties
declared.
with the
Let's
district
move on.
attorney's office, how
403,
often do
403,
you
403.
map or plot different calls as it relates to the cell site location data contained within the call detail records?
All the time. On
Another objection on foundation for this part of the testimony as it relates to mapping. Foundation for establishment.
As it relates to what, I really need y'all to use the mics. All right, so,
I'm laying the foundation.
okay, he's in the midst of it.
So how often do you plot and map different call detail records, cell site location data?
very, very often. Maybe not on every single case, but on many, many, many cases. How often? I would say at least once a week. Again, that's a very, very conservative estimate, but most cases have cell phone records, and I will generally, if there are cell phone records, want to look at those to make sure that the data is what we believe it to be.
Okay, and can you tell the jurors a little bit about your experience in the sense of how many years have you been utilizing cell site location information to map or plot different sets of phone records and specific phone calls within different sets of records?
Since 2012.
Okay, so roughly how many years? We're looking at what, over 10?
Yes.
And within those 10 years, can you tell the jurors how many sets of phone records do you believe that you have mapped or plotted cell site location information related to call detail records?
That would be hundreds. I don't keep a tally, but the number of cases that I deal with a year since that time, it would just be in the hundreds. A lot of cases.
Okay, and in the cases that you have done what you just described, do you often work in tandem or in conjunction with different members of law enforcement, such as the Atlanta Police Department or other agencies within Fulton County?
Yes.
Okay, and have there been times that you also have worked with members of the FBI or different task forces as it relates to mapping and plotting call detail records?
Maybe like consulted with. Work would imply that I was like part of the team, or with respect to the FBI, that is. No, I mean, I've consulted with them.
Okay, so as it relates to this case, did you utilize cell site location information to map different calls for Kenneth Copeland after you listened to his recorded statement on June 10th of 2015?
I did.
And can you tell the jurors, as it relates to the mapping or the plotting that you did for Mr. Copeland's records, were they consistent at times with being near the Green store?
Yes.
Again, Your Honor, I'm going to object. Cumulative, Agent Bernie has already testified to these matters.
And my response is these questions will be brief, but again, Mr. Sprinkle's analysis is related to the statement that Mr. Copeland was impeached with during his testimony for the statement he gave on June 10th of 2015.
All right, and can you clarify whether whatever this analysis is based on Mr. Sprinkle's own plotting or whatever Mr. Bernie had already done?
Yes, the plotting that I've been talking to you about as it relates to Mr. Copeland is this plotting or mapping that you did yourself.
Yes.
And upon doing the plotting or mapping yourself with the cell site location information, well, let's start with, can you tell the jurors what information, I guess, are you inputting or using in order to get specific plots for specific calls?
So basically what I do is I'll have the phone records. So I'll have a set of phone records, and there will be some cell site location information that's in the same row as the date and time the phone number's called. And I'll use Google Earth. Sometimes some phone records are real easy. If they're from AT&T or T-Mobile, they'll just have the latitude and longitude of the tower actually in the records. Other phone companies like Sprint at the time or Verizon, they just put some sort of number that's unique to them. Like it's a number that identifies the tower for them. It'll be like 14732 or something. That's by no means a lot. That was just a number I just came up with out of nowhere, but it'll be some sort of number, and I'll have to cross-reference another spreadsheet where that spreadsheet will have the latitude and longitude. But long story short, though, I just take the latitude and longitude of the tower, I put it into Google Earth, and then I use a graphic plugin in Google Earth to create I get what I call a pie slice that represents the approximate area of coverage, or basically just points in the direction of the antenna or the azimuth of the tower.
Okay, so that was a long story.
Oh.
So can you tell the jurors in your review of the phone records, what time, if any, was Mr. Copeland's handset in the area of the green store?
So his handset was consistent with was utilizing a tower that was consistent with it being in the area of the green store between 7:26 and 7:27 p.m.
Okay, and can you tell the jurors through your review of Mr. Copeland's June 10th statement, did I guess the location, the McDonald's off of Cleveland Avenue, become a point of interest that was related to the investigation you were doing?
Yes.
And can you tell the jurors in your review of did you review Mr. Copeland's call detail records and the cell site location information in regards to that interest point?
I did.
And can you tell the jurors in your review what time, if any, Mr. Copeland was in the area of, or consistent with being in the area of, the McDonald's off of Cleveland Avenue?
All right, so like I testified previously, his phone gets to the area or uses a tower in the area of the green store from 7:26, 7:27 p.m. It remained in that general area or tower until about 7:47. And then 7:49, it pinged off the tower that serviced the general area of the McDonald's at Old Hayville and Cleveland Avenue.
And you said 7:49?
That's correct.
As you continue to review the records, can you tell the jurors, after continuing to listen to Mr. Copeland's June 10th statement, did the Sky House located in Midtown become a point of interest relevant to the investigation that you were doing?
The Sky House condominiums at 1080 West Peachtree Street, yes.
Okay, and can you tell the jurors why or how did that location become a point of interest relevant to your investigation?
It was the location or a location that Jeffrey Williams resided.
Okay. And in the time that you were, reviewing the records related to Mr. Copeland and reviewing the statement, can you tell the jurors at any point did Mr. Copeland reference during his statement that he communicated with a handset that would be associated with Mr. Garlington?
He did.
And can you tell the jurors, was that something that you attempted to locate within the call detail records of Mr. Copeland as you reviewed them?
I did. I didn't find a number that I could conclude was Mr. Garlington's, though if I remember correctly, I also said he contacted him via FaceTime, so I wouldn't be able to see those calls and call detail records anyway.
Okay, and that's something you talked about and mentioned as to why previously when you testified before this court and the jury, right?
I don't recall if I said that or not.
Okay. Now, can you tell the jurors, I guess, what you were able to determine, if anything, as it related to the call detail records being consistent with Mr. Copeland's handset being in the area of Sky House Midtown.
It was later that evening. His handset, from what I recall, from what I remember, it was after 11 p.m. when his handset utilized the tower that was near the Sky House. So it did utilize the tower at some point. It serviced the area of the Sky House.
And can you tell the jurors, the Sky House Midtown, how was that building, I guess, related to or relevant to the investigation that you were doing as you continued to review the statement of Mr. Copeland and other materials that you received from the Atlanta Police Department?
That was the location that was said to be where Mr. Copeland and others converged later that evening on January 10th, 2015.
Okay. Now, I want to talk to you about other statements that you reviewed. Do you recall also reviewing the statement for Mr. Quindarius Zachary from August 5th of 2015?
I do.
And can you tell the jurors, did you listen to that statement, I guess, in its entirety or in full?
I did.
And do you recall that during that statement, did Mr. Zachary reference any, I guess, rental vehicles?
He did.
And can you tell the jurors a little bit about what Mr. Zachary said during that statement as it related to a rental vehicle?
From what I remember, that he mentioned there was an Infiniti that was involved, and they believed that the manager for Mr. Williams rented the Infiniti.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors after getting that information from the statement, did you request anything from any rental companies here in the city of Atlanta?
Yes.
Okay. And did you?
Well, it's a small clarification. I requested information from rental companies, and I didn't just specify from their physical locations only in the city of Atlanta. I asked from the rental car companies that they give me records of any rental cars that were rented by a list of people during a time, regardless of where the location was.
Okay. And did you do that in relation to Mr. Jeffery Williams?
Yes.
And can you tell the jurors, did you receive any information back as it related to any rental vehicles in the name of Mr. Williams?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to asked and answered previously.
I don't know if it has been with this witness, but it's certainly been established.
I can move on. Well, I want to show you what's been marked and entered into evidence as State's Exhibit 335Y. And when it gets up there, page 7 of 335Y. And as Mr. Atkins is getting to page 7, can you tell the jurors, do you recognize previously tendered and admitted State's Exhibit 335Y?
Okay, is the 335Y what's being displayed on these television sets behind me?
That's correct.
Yes, I recognize this.
What is State's Exhibit 335Y?
These are records that I received from Hertz Rent-A-Car.
Okay, and are these records, I guess, who are these records, I guess, related to and in reference to?
Jeffrey Williams.
Your Honor, I'm going to object. This is cumulative, and it has been asked and answered.
Well, my response is the specific information as it relates to what's inside State's Exhibit 335Y was not elicited from any witness as it relates to the trial.
Okay, if there's something new on this exhibit, then.
I'll just cut to the chase. In State Exhibit 335Y was a phone number that was associated with the rental for Mr. Jeffrey Williams located within.
There was a phone number located somewhere within there, yes.
Okay, and can you tell the jurors what that phone number was?
I don't recall. It's somewhere in the, I think, was it the one that ended in 3504 maybe? It should be in the business record though.
And do you see it on page 7?
Yes, 3904, 504-975, 3904. That's right.
And can you tell the jurors, after, I guess, receiving this document and learning of this number, was a request made or a search warrant done for the records as it relates to Jeffrey Williams?
Yes.
Okay, and did you receive those records back related to the phone number associated with the handset of Mr. Williams?
Yes.
All right. Now I want to ask you a few questions about other sets of records that you reviewed in relation to the information you had received from Mr. Zachary and Mr. Copeland after reviewing their statements, okay?
Okay.
Did you request either through search warrant or subpoena the records for Justin Cobb?
I don't know if it was me that did that, but yeah, we did obtain the records for Justin Cobb.
Okay. And
actually, no, I believe it was. I recall drafting a search warrant on that, so yes.
Okay. As well as, did you receive either, whether it was by you or another member of law enforcement you were working in conjunction with, the records for Mr. McMullins?
That McMullen was somebody with the Atlanta Police Department, but I did receive them.
And did you review them?
I did.
All right. And regardless of who requested them, did you also review the records for Kelvin Treadwell?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I want to talk to you about specifically, did you review those records kind of how you've described today as it relates to January 10th of 2015?
Yes.
Now, I want to talk about some of the activity that you saw as you did the review of the records. Specifically, can you tell the jurors, you talked about you received records from Mr. Bradford based on the phone number being a common number called by Mr. Zachary, Mr. Copeland, and Mr. Treadwell, I believe you said, correct?
Yes.
And can you tell the jurors in reviewing the call detail records, did you review the records as it relates to the point of interest of the Texaco off of Cleveland Avenue?
Yes.
And can you tell the jurors, as you reviewed Mr. Bradford's records in relation to that Texaco, what you determined from your analysis?
What I determined from my analysis of Mr. Bradford's tower logs was that his handset utilized a tower that was in close proximity to that Texaco, and therefore 330 McDaniel Street, the incident location, between the hours of 7:11 p.m. to 7:19 p.m.
And I should have asked you this first, but as you were reviewing statements and call detail records, did you also receive and review any video surveillance?
I did.
And is that the surveillance that I think you briefly described previously as it relates to the Texaco off of Cleveland, as well as the barbershop not far from the Texaco?
Right, the barber shop, like between 60 and 100 yards, yes, away. Yeah, that too.
Okay. And I want to show you State's Exhibits 591. Y through 598Y.
Are we doing?
Have you had an opportunity
I mean,
to
this is
review
ridiculous.
those photographs?
Move on.
And
This is
do those photographs
This is bullcrap right here.
contained in States Exhibit
Folks,
591.
this is teetotal bullcrap. What's going on right now? This judge needs to get a hold of this trial and do her job, because this is getting pathetic. This should have been stopped. But, it is what it is.
5 through 598 fairly and accurately depict the Texaco from July 10th of 2015.
January 10th, 2015?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yes, they do. These are screenshots. It looks like they're screenshots I took, actually.
Okay. And Your Honor, at this time, the state would tender what's been marked as States Exhibits 591Y through 598Y.
Admitted.
And while we're at it, Mr. Sprinkle, previously admitted into evidence was 292YL through N. We'll review those. Do you also recognize those as screenshots from what you've described from the Texaco that you actually took?
Yes.
Now, can you describe for the jurors in States Exhibit 591Y what we're looking at?
This is a screenshot taken from the video from the Texaco. It was a surveillance camera that captured the exterior of the Texaco station. This would be the gas pumps that were closest to 330 McDaniel Street. The timestamp in the lower on the video is 6:41 p.m. and 58 seconds. Literally, it's 18:41:58, but that's 24-hour time, so it's 6:41 p.m. and 58 seconds.
Okay. And is there a vehicle, or do you see the vehicle, I guess that's in the center of States Exhibit 591Y?
Yes, I do.
And through, I guess, your investigation, can you tell the jurors what you're able to determine what type of vehicle that is?
2001 Pontiac Bonneville, gray in color.
And in conjunction with all the things that we've described that you've reviewed, the statements, the call detail records, the video surveillance, I know you briefly spoke about it, but did you also review different social media accounts and photographs as it relates to some of the individuals, specifically here, Mr. Bradford, that we've described previously?
Yes.
And can you tell the jurors in your review of Mr. Bradford's social media and contained in previously admitted exhibits, States Exhibits 360Y through 363Y, what you found in Mr. Bradford's social media that caught your attention?
He often posed in photos with a 2001 Pontiac Bonneville. I mean, he'd be leaning up against it, et cetera. It looked like it was just a car that he was with frequently.
Okay. And prior to your review of Mr. Bradford's social media account and seeing these photographs with him with standing next to or near a Pontiac, had the Pontiac that's contained in States Exhibit 591Y I guess been an integral part of your investigation at that point?
Well, not integral, no.
Okay. Was it something that you found or didn't find relevant until you reviewed Mr. Bradford's social media accounts?
Sustained. Can you?
Well, let me ask you this question. Just tell the jurors after reviewing or finding these photographs of Mr. Bradford and the Pontiac, how you were able to use that to forward your investigation.
Okay, so I had the tower data for Mr. Bradford's phone that placed him in the area of the crime scene from 7:11 p.m. to 7:19 p.m. I had calls from the jail to Mr. Bradford. I also had these pictures from his social media that I found that showed him with a Pontiac Bonneville. Now, Bradford was not known. He was not in any of the documents that I obtained from the Atlanta Police Department. As far as I knew, he was unknown to the investigation entirely. So I was trying to figure out who this Mr. Bradford was why I had this data that this information was made it appear that he was somehow would at least know something about what I was looking into. And so when I went back and looked at the video and I saw this 2001 Pontiac Bonneville pull up to the gas pump, that's when it clicked. And I started paying particular attention to the surveillance video from the Texaco station.
Okay, and I want to show you, Mr. Atkins is going to put on the screen a state's exhibit. $598Y. Now, in State's Exhibit 598Y, can you describe to the jurors what they're looking at and the relevance it was to your part of the investigation and working on this case?
So 598Y is a picture from Mr. Bradford's Instagram page, and it is one of a few photos that showed him next to a Pontiac Bonneville, like I testified to previously. And I obtained that photo around the time that I identified his phone number and got his phone records and tower usage data that placed him in the area of the crime scene, as I testified to previously.
And the photograph that's next to him standing in, next to the Pontiac, can you describe to the jurors where that's from? There's two photos contained within. How are they relevant to each other?
Well, the one on the right is a still shot from the surveillance footage from the night of the murder.
Okay.
From the Texaco station.
And can you tell the jurors in your review of the video surveillance, you said in State's Exhibit 591Y that Pontiac arrived to the Texaco what time?
About 6:41 p.m.
And can you tell the jurors in your review of the surveillance how long in total was that Pontiac seen on the video surveillance?
If I may refer to my reports, I get the numbers.
If it will help refresh your recollection, yes, just look up when you're done.
So it was there. The Pontiac was in view of the surveillance cameras at the Texaco station when it pulled up into the pump at 6:41 p.m. and until it drove away from the station at 7:17 p.m.
So fair to say, reviewing your report helped refresh your recollection as to how long it was there?
Yes.
Okay. And you said it was roughly 40 minutes?
Yeah, about that.
And can you tell the jurors in your review of Mr. Bradford's call detail records, was that consistent with him being, or were they consistent with him being in the area of the Texaco off of Cleveland Avenue for roughly 40 minutes?
Yeah, but his phone traveled to the Texaco off of Cleveland Avenue after it departed the area, or not, excuse me, are you talking about the McDonald's?
No, so you just described to the jurors, let me rephrase my question. So that you saw the Pontiac remain at the Texaco for roughly 40 minutes. You remember saying that?
Yes,
41 to, I think you believe 7:17?
6:41 to 7:17, correct.
And can you tell the jurors in reviewing Mr. Bradford's call detail records and the activity on his phone during 6:11 and 7:17, were they consistent with him being in the area of the Texaco during that time period?
At the Texaco at Northside Drive and McDaniel Street, yes. His phone pinged in that area from 7:11 to 7:19. It utilized the tower, so it didn't ping at the tower that entire time. But the time frame that his phone did ping at the tower, off the tower and sector that serviced that general area, was encompassed, by the surveillance footage.
Let me ask you this question: was his phone, or was there activity on his phone during that entire period of time, or were there times where his phone wasn't utilizing a tower?
Well, his phone, it wasn't connected to the tower the entire time, as if it was like streaming data or something like that. Or if it was, I didn't get any records that indicated that. It was only used, it only connected to the tower to when it sending or receiving a phone call.
Okay. And as a part of your investigation, did you also review or look into the social media accounts or the Twitter account for Mr. Kendrick?
Yes.
And can you tell the jurors in State's Exhibit I believe it's 524Y. Was this a photograph that you located from the Twitter account of Mr. Kendrick? But once it gets up there.
Oh, there we go. Yes, yeah, it is. There's a, and I don't know that it's part of the exhibit because I seem to remember this gray bar going across the screen with the other exhibits as well. Yeah, now it's moved. But yes, I do recognize that. That's an image from Mr. Kendrick's Twitter account.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors, was there anything about the jacket that Mr. Kendrick is wearing in State's Exhibit 524Y that you, after seeing this and also reviewing the video surveillance, that was helpful to your investigation?
So yeah, the interior surveillance from the Texaco, at 641, the Pontiac 2001 Bonneville pulls up to a pump, and the front seat passenger exits the vehicle and walks into the convenience store attached to the Texaco, and in so doing came in very close proximity to an interior surveillance camera. And so this footage revealed the outfit donned by the front seat passenger, and that image from the Twitter page that you just displayed on the monitor behind me, or the television behind me, that man, Mr. Kendrick from the Twitter page, was donning what appeared to be the same jacket as the man from the video, the surveillance video from the Texaco.
And is that what we're looking at, the comparison that you just described that you did in State's Exhibit 593Y?
That's yes.
And can you tell the jurors, the photograph, we're looking at it on the left-hand side from the convenience store. Can you tell the jurors the time period in which that photograph or that screenshot would have captured?
It was very shortly after the Pontiac Bonneville arrived on scene. If you would like the exact matter of fact, I've just looked at my report to refresh my recollection about this. Okay. It was actually at 6:42 p.m.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors in the photograph to the right from Mr. Kendrick's Twitter account what time that photo of Mr. Kendrick was posted and on what date?
It was posted on January 10th, 2015. As you can see there, because I testified about this previously, I moused over the date, and that made the time pop up, and the time is 7:35 p.m.
Now, as you continued to review the video surveillance, can you tell the jurors, did the individuals that you saw, I guess, exit and enter the Pontiac later interact with another sedan?
Yes.
And in State's Exhibit 594Y, and here I thought the screenshots would be less difficult than the freezing video.
Objection, Your Honor. This is cumulative of prior testimony that we've had at least once, if not twice, in this case.
Any response?
I mean, there's been no.
Is this going to be a comparison?
Yes.
Okay, overruled.
Now, can you tell the jurors, were you able to, I guess using your number of years of experience, able to determine the type of vehicle in which we're seeing depicted in front of the Pontiac in the middle of the screen?
The Volkswagen CC VR6 Sport.
Okay. And when you previously testified, you talked about someone you had, I guess, a name that you had come across during your investigation, Miss Ariel Bax?
Yes.
And can you tell the jurors, in getting her name, were you able to use public databases to determine any vehicles registered in her name?
Yes, I was.
And can you tell the jurors what type of vehicle was registered Ms. Bax's name during this time period of January 10th, 2015?
The Volkswagen CC VR6.
Okay. And in your review of the make and model and year that Ms. Bax had, was the vehicle consistent with what we're looking at in State's Exhibit 594Y?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Now, you also talked about previously an individual, Miss Kenya Morton.
Yes.
And can you tell the jurors why you looked into Miss Morton as it relates to this investigation?
I'll object to the reasoning behind what this witness is doing, otherwise.
Sustained. Can you rephrase?
Yes. In the phone calls that
Did
you
recover the
reviewed
YSL
and have described today from Mr. Kendrick, did
Yes,
Mr. Kendrick place
I'm
any
going to sit
calls
with the computer.
to
Just
Miss
I'll be
Morton?
right back.
Yes.
And through your listening of the calls and your investigation, were you able to determine how Mr. Kendrick and Miss Morton were associated or knew each other?
Romantically involved.
This is fun for hearsay.
It's a review of phone calls that are in evidence.
And also speculation, Your Honor.
Sustained.
It's,
Well, without telling me what the association was, were you able to see several calls between Ms. Morton and Mr. Kendrick?
Yes.
Okay. And in fact, in one of the phone calls that you listened to and has been admitted into evidence as it relates to Mr. Arnold, did you hear Miss Morton in one of the phone calls?
Yes.
And can you tell the jurors the date of the phone call in which you heard Miss Morton in the background?
January 10th, 2015.
And what time?
7:42 p.m.
Okay. And that time in relation to, how was that time, the 7:42 p.m. that you heard Miss Morton in the background, related to or the time in which Mr. Donovan Thomas was shot and killed?
Well, the 911 call is placed contemporaneously with the shooting, and that 911 call is placed at 7:22 p.m. So that call was 20 minutes after the 911.
Speculation. That's the foundation.
On the what?
The contemporaneous.
Sustained.
I guess I need clarity. I'm not certain as the contemporaneous. As I know what it
I
means.
don't know if he is able to testify from anything that it was contemporaneous with the murder. I think that's what the objection is to. Is that right? I mean, he can testify to what time the 911 call was.
I'll rephrase.
Sustained.
Agreed. I'll ask a different question. Mr. Sprinkle, you said the 911 call was at what time?
7:22 p.m.
And the call in which you heard Miss Morton's voice and reference to her name was at what time?
7:42 p.m.
Okay. And during that same phone call, was there reference to Miss Ariel or Ari?
That I don't recall.
Okay. And well, let me ask you this question. Shortly after the Volkswagen in State's Exhibit 494Y arrived at the gas station, can you tell the jurors, and previously admitted in, I believe they're before you, State's Exhibits 292YL through 292N, Can you tell the jurors what time another vehicle that you determined to be related to your investigation arrived at that same Texaco?
7:16 p.m.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors, based on the statement of Quindarius Zachary, why that vehicle was of interest as you watched the video surveillance from the Texaco?
Because it was an Infiniti Q50.
Now, can you tell the jurors during what time did that Infiniti arrive?
7:16 p.m.
Okay. And at the time that you reviewed the video surveillance, can you tell the jurors, did members from the Pontiac interact with the vehicle depicted in this state's exhibit?
Yeah, yes. The man that occupied the front passenger seat and then entered the store at 6:42 p.m. wearing the coat, he interacted with the person or persons occupying the Infiniti.
And I apologize for the record, that's 292YL. Now, Mr. Sprinkle, can you also describe for the jurors, did an individual get out of the rear passenger area of the Pontiac?
Yes.
And can you explain to the jurors I guess, can you explain to the jurors what you observed that person, I guess, do?
Objection, cumulative, best evidence.
Sustained.
Mr. Sprinkle, how long, based on your review of the video surveillance, did the Infiniti remain within the Texaco gas pump area?
About a minute, if that. It pulled in at 7:16 and pulled out at 7:17.
Okay. And can you tell the jurors, is that what we're looking at in State's Exhibit 596Y?
Yes.
I'm going to object. Can I maybe approach?
You may.
Well, I'll ask the You know what? I know what you're seeing with the perspective of all of Now, Mr. Sprinkle, let me ask you this question based on your review of all the information you've kind of described here today. As it relates to times for when a 911 call was placed, times as it relates to, I guess, found within call detail records, and then times like the one you just referenced in the video surveillance for the Texaco. Can you tell the jurors, I guess, through your investigation, how you compared, I guess, times from the video surveillance to things like the 911 call and call detail records?
Well, your call detail records, that's, the times in those are gonna be pretty consistent with, the atomic clock,
Why is that?
Well, they're a cell phone provider and they're computerized records and they're just gonna be synced up because they're on a computer system with like an internet time protocol or which is synced up with the atomic clock. So that's a good gauge as to the exact time of something. Also, the 911 call system, I found in my experience that 911 calls, the timestamps on those are accurate. Surveillance videos can be a little less so. But what I found here was
Why is this man still on the freaking stand? Come
knowing
on.
when the 911 call was placed, comparing all of that with cell phone records and tower logs and all that.
Gracious, damn.
The surveillance.
He can't have that
When
much testimony.
comparing, for example, the 911
Nobody's
call
got
with
that much
surveillance
testimony.
data from the text
Irrelevant
code,
anyway,
you can
still.
see the events that are consistent with the shooting on the text code, which people ran inside the store, if I remember correctly. I do remember correctly, they did. And from that, you can place a pretty good timestamp or time when the drive-by shooting occurred.
You know that judge is like, would y'all please shut up?
Would it be your testimony today that all of the times are, I guess, synced up exact as it relates to each other? For example, the call detail records and the Texaco video surveillance.
No, I can say that they're linked up exactly. Surveillance videos, it's not uncommon for them to be a minute or two long.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that last.
Can you speak into the mic?
It's not uncommon for surveillance videos to be a minute or two off. So I can't say that basically the watches of the surveillance video and the cell phone records were synchronized.
Okay. And we talked earlier a little bit about the phone records or the additional phone records that you reviewed. For example, Justin Cobb and Mr. McMullins. Do you remember that?
I do.
And can you tell the jurors upon receiving those records, however which way they were requested, did you utilize, I guess, reviewing those records as it relates to the things that we've described previously here today, the video surveillance as well as the statements of both Mr. Zachary and Mr. Copeland?
Yes.
And I want to draw your attention specifically to the time period, roughly 7:29 p.m. All the way, I guess, 10 minutes to 7:39 p.m. So that 10-minute period, okay?
Okay.
Can you tell the jurors in your review of that activity, was there any activity as it relates to the handset associated with Mr. McMullins and the handset associated with Jeffrey Williams?
Your Honor, this is cumulative. Agent Bernie already testified to all this.
Sustained.
Well, let me ask you this, as it relates to your review of the call detail records, specifically the call logs of between Mr. Williams and Mr. Treadwell, can you tell the jury how many incoming and outgoing calls there were between Mr. Treadwell and Mr. Williams?
About the same objection.
Sustained.
The specific number of calls between Mr. Treadwell and Mr. Williams, I don't believe was ever discussed.
Pretty sure it was.
It's all painfully regarding different ways.
All right, I'll ask you this question. As it related to your review of the call detail records for Mr. Copeland, okay? Did you, during that time period of 7:29 to 7:39 p.m., locate any calls, whether it be incoming or outgoing, between Mr. Copeland and Mr. Williams.
729 to 739?
Correct.
If I may look at the logs. No, my short answer is I don't believe so. And that remains my answers on reviewing the actual phone logs. There were no calls between Mr. Copeland and Mr. Williams. That would have been in the phone logs from the company. Again, during Mr. Copeland's statement, he said he called Mr. Williams earlier that evening on FaceTime. FaceTime calls are not going to appear in phone records from the phone company.
Okay. But from your review, is it your testimony you didn't see any calls between Mr. Copeland and Mr. Williams?
That's right.
How about as it relates to Mr. Copeland and Mr. Bradford, Mr. Cobb, Mr. McMullins, or Mr. Treadwell?
Not that I found, no.
Okay, and I'd ask you the same series of questions as it relates to Quindarius Zachary. Did you see any activity on Mr. Zachary's records between Mr. Williams, Mr. Bradford, Mr. Cobb, Mr. McMullins, and Mr. Treadwell?
All right, well, I'm reviewing, and I'm looking at his records right now too, just to make sure I'm not mistaken. What were the names that you just gave me again?
Mr. Williams, did you see any activity as it relates to Mr. Zachary and Mr. Williams?
I do not.
And between Mr. Zachary and Mr. Bradford and Mr. Cobb?
I do not.
And were there any, I guess, incoming or outgoing calls between Mr. Zachary and Mr. McMullins or Mr. Treadwell?
Not that I see, no.
Okay. And I want to ask you lastly about Mr. Antonio Sledge. In your review of his call detail records, did you see any incoming or outgoing calls between Mr. Sledge and Mr. Williams between the time period of 7:29 p.m. to 7:39 p.m.?
Oh, here we go. No, I don't see any.
And what about between Mr. Sledge and Mr. Bradford or Mr. Cobb?
Between what time frame again?
7:29 and 7:39 p.m.
Justin Cobb called Javaris Bradford at 7:31 p.m.
And I'm sorry, I need to be more clear. Did you see any, was there any incoming or outgoing calls between Mr. Zachary and Mr. Bradford?
I'm reviewing Mr. Zachary's records. I do not see any.
And in your review of Mr. Zachary records, did you see any incoming or outgoing calls between Mr. Zachary and Mr. McMullen?
No, I don't see any.
And lastly, for that same time period, did you see any activity, whether it be incoming or outgoing calls between Mr. Zachary and Mr. Treadwell?
No, I don't see any.
And when you're reviewing Mr. Zachary's records, which are contained in State's Exhibit 517Y, is that correct? Is that correct? Is the records contained for Mr. Zachary, do you recall those being 517Y?
I don't know the exhibit number for the records.
Okay. Your Honor, further questions pending redirect.
Anybody have questions for this witness right now that are going to last less than like an hour?
Less than an hour?
Yeah.
Oh, I hope so.
Okay.
Wow.
Come on.
If I'm not done an hour, start throwing things in.
Okay.
Can
Is that
we
just
do
the
that even
court
if it
or
is less than
anybody
an
in
hour?
the courtroom?
Mr. Sprinkle, good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. And of course, we know each other. You know who I represent, right?
Yes.
Okay. I want to start out by talking to you about the jail calls and specifically my client, Shannon Stillwell's jail calls.
Okay.
I believe you testified that you downloaded, you estimated, I believe, 700?
So, yes, the batch that I downloaded from 2015, maybe the calls descended into 2016 as well. I don't remember. I think it was around 700 audio files. So that would represent 700 calls. It's not 700 exactly, but that's what I remember.
I understand. And you, do you have a ballpark of how many you reviewed?
I didn't review all of them.
Okay.
And a matter of fact, I probably reviewed like maybe 50 to 75.
Okay. And regardless of how many you personally reviewed, when you downloaded them, they are saved onto your computer, your hard drive.
All of them are saved, yes.
Okay, and they would have been passed on to the prosecution team in this case, so they could review all of them, correct?
That's correct.
All right, cool. All right, I just want to, your job actually with the DA's office right now is you do prelims. You cover prelims for cases, correct? Amongst other things.
That's correct.
All right. And I just want to unpack a little bit about what you said about preliminary hearings, is when I say prelims, preliminary hearings. You said typically a lead detective testifies.
That's right.
Okay, and you said hearsay is allowed, meaning the lead detective is allowed to testify about what other people said.
That's correct.
Okay. And you are aware that jail call that was played that was tough to hear, a little bit low, that was from November 19th, 2015, correct?
That's right.
All right. And November 19th, 2015 is the day that Shannon Stillwell had his prelim, correct?
That's what I recall, yes.
Okay. And that's why you had interest in that call.
That's right.
All right. And that call was made later in the day after Mr. Stillwell would have returned back to the jail from his preliminary hearing.
That's right.
All right. In Shannon, in Mr. Stillwell's preliminary hearing specifically, I know you said lead detectives generally are the only ones that testified. Detective Thorpe testified in that preliminary hearing, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Kenneth Copeland did not testify.
No.
Demekion Garlington did not testify.
No.
Quindarius Zachary did not testify.
No.
Okay. And I know it's hard to hear, but we're going to bring some volume to it, okay? Mr. Stillwell on that call said, I just went to court and they let everything out.
That sounds right, yes.
Okay, and that was after Detective Thorpe testified, correct?
That's right, after he heard Detective Thorpe's testimony. Correct.
Okay, he said they threw out, and it was tough to hear, so I want to make sure we're clear. On that call, he said they threw out Yak, Duop, Nard, correct?
I don't recall that they threw out
And
Yak.
I'm not suggesting throughout the case. I'm saying throughout the names.
That sounds right. I definitely heard him mention those names.
Okay.
So I took it to mean maybe like their names were mentioned, maybe.
Right. And because it was hard to hear, I'm just trying to make it clear. He's not saying, and nowhere in that call did he say he was with those people or anything like that that day.
No.
Okay. And again, Those names were mentioned by Detective Thorpe, correct?
That's right.
All right, cool. And he was, well, you can't testify to his mind state, but in that call, he said F word D, Woody, and the other D, correct?
I don't know. Yeah, that's not a verbatim quote. It's pretty close. I mean, I think the spirit of his comment was captured in your quotation there.
Okay, and then he said, them F N-words know what is going on.
Something along those lines, yeah.
And then that's the case that was, that's the tape that was played in court today, but there are 8 other calls on that CD, correct?
Correct.
All right. You also listened in on another call that Mr. Stillwell had with that same young lady on November 23rd, 2015, correct?
I think so. That sounds right.
At 16:08, at 4:08 p.m.
That sounds correct.
All right. At 5:07 into that call, Mr. Stillwell says, N-words will say whatever, correct?
That sounds correct. I know that was the general spirit. I don't know if that's an exact quotation as to what he said.
Okay. At 5:15 in that call, Mr. Stillwell said, they just trying to get the heat off their ass.
Again, that sounds like the general, that was something along the lines of what he said, that was the topic of conversation. I just can't say if that was a verbatim quote or not.
And again, Mr. Copeland at that time was facing federal and state charges.
That's right.
And Mr. Zachary, the other D, was facing charges related to the April 28th, 2015 shooting of houses, correct?
That's right.
All right. Mr. Stillwell in that November 23rd, 2015 call said, people will say anything to save their ass.
That's evidence. Mr. Sharp would like to play the calls and.
Sustained.
Okay. It is in evidence, trying to save some time, but.
I appreciate that, but if there's a valid objection, I've got to sustain it.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
I twisted his arm. Also in that call, and this is just one more, and then we'll move on. Mr. Stillwell said, they will sit right there and lie.
I don't recall that exact utterance being made, but it wouldn't be inconsistent with the general tone and of the call and the other things that he was saying.
Okay, cool. All right. Regarding Mr. Copeland's cell records and the plotting you did, let me get this right. 722 is the 911 call.
Yes.
Okay. You said at 7:26, you have Mr. Copeland headset pinging on the tower. So 4 minutes later, he's pinging on the tower at the Green Store or in the vicinity of the Green Store.
That is correct. It had moved north to that tower. So it was actually south of that tower seconds prior to, but yes.
Well, cell phone records aren't like a chart where you see, for instance, a cursor moving through a map, are they? You don't see real-time movements during a call, do you?
No.
You just get spots in certain points in time.
Yes, that's
when cell calls are initiated.
That is, well, you get the tower and the antenna utilized by the handset at the time of the call. It's a very big area.
But just at the time, right, vague area, but also just at the time of the initiation of the call.
Correct.
Okay. And so 4 minutes after the purported time of the 911 call, that headset is utilizing the tower near the green store.
That's right.
Okay. And we also, the truth is, we can speculate. We don't know how much time passed. We know that 911 call was made at 7:22, but we don't know how much time passed between the shooting and the 911 call, do we?
No, I can't say exactly. From what I recall, it's pretty quickly, but I can't say the exact seconds.
Well, we don't, I mean, people, before they call 911, they can try to hide guns, right?
There's any number of things people can do before they call 911.
They can try to get guns before they call 911.
The possibilities are endless as to what somebody could do before they call 911.
And some people will do certain things before they call the police to where they're at.
Speculation.
Sustained.
Well, the bottom line is we don't know how much time passed. So we're dealing with inexact times.
Yes.
Okay, great. And you would agree that the green store is within a minute drive of the barbershop?
It's pretty close. I don't know. I can't say if it's a minute, but it's less than a mile away.
Less than a mile away. Thank you. All right. Finally, I'm just going to ask you about one other matter. Javaris Bradford has come up, aka Tuda, right?
Yes.
Okay. He's the owner of, through your investigator, he's the owner of the Pontiac at the Texaco.
Yeah, from what I recall, he was the registered owner.
Right. And he came up in your investigation, and the fact that Pontiac was on the video piqued your interest.
That's what I said. Yep.
All right. At some point in November of 2018, he wasn't charged in 2015.
He wasn't.
Okay. In November of 2018, he was still in the community, correct? He wasn't in jail or anything.
That's right.
All right. And you determined that you wanted to speak to him.
I did.
All right. And did you reach out to him?
I don't think I reached out to him. It was likely a DA's office investigator. Somebody reached out to him.
Okay. And was he asked to come in? Was he compelled to come into the DA's office? How did that work?
I believe we gave him a grand jury subpoena, if I remember correctly.
Okay, you issued a grand jury subpoena for him to come in and speak to you?
Well, the grand jury was in session that day. Having never spoken to him, I wanted to speak with him before I potentially put him up before the grand jury, and I did end up speaking with him. And at that point, I determined that not to put him up.
Okay, that was November 13th, 2018, correct?
That's correct.
And you had a meeting with him in a conference room in the DA's office, correct?
Right, it was on video. I have it right here, actually.
Yes. And present were you, Investigator Thorpe, at some point came into the meeting, correct?
Investigator Thorpe, I think he was present the entire meeting.
Okay.
It's on video, but from what I remember, he was there the entire time.
Okay. And then I don't want to mess up the young lady's name, so I'm not even going to try, but there was an investigator with the DA's office. Could you say her name correctly?
Cynthia Nwakocha.
Nwakocha.
Cynthia, first name, last name, Nwokocha, I believe.
Okay. Thank you. And Javaris Bradford showed up, correct?
That's correct.
He did not have an attorney.
He did not.
And he showed up to the conference room without an attorney, correct?
Sustained.
Okay. For this meeting, you had video from the Texaco, or was it stills or video?
There were definitely stills. I think it may have, I can't recall if I played motion pictures of the surveillance video or I just had stills. He was at the very least showed still images.
And you told him, in fact, that you were investigating the homicide of Donovan Thomas.
I'm gonna have to research the point as to what Mr. Sprinkle told Mr. Bradford.
Sustained.
To what? I'm not asking what Mr. Bradford told Mr. Sprinkle. I'm asking what Mr. Sprinkle told Mr. Bradford.
Oh, okay. Overruled.
Still adequate statement.
Well, y'all can ask him. He's right here.
Okay. So you told him that there was evidence against him in this case.
I don't recall exactly what I said. I bet I likely said that to him. I would go so far as to say as yes, I did. That would
report. I'm sorry for interrupting.
Yes, I'm sure I said that to him because there was.
Okay. And you wanted him to speak to you about who was at the Texaco, correct?
I did.
Okay. And you told him that your supervisor wanted to charge him, but you were holding things off to give him a chance to talk.
Yeah, I mean, it is. Sustained.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Was your supervisor Pat Dutcher at the time?
He was in.
Sustained.
Your Honor, may we approach?
You may.
Your Honor, based on the court's ruling, I do not have any more questions, and I'll note with like 50 minutes to spare.
That is correct. All right. Is any other defense attorney going to have questions for Mr. Sprinkle?
Briefly.
Okay. All right. I think we can fit in another one or maybe two.
Good afternoon, Mr. Sprinkle, or ADA Sprinkle.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Very well, thank you.
Can I just look at this? You can see this demonstrative, right?
I can.
I'll leave this here. Is that okay? That's okay. I don't see Mr. Kendrick's phone on there.
That is correct.
So you didn't do any analysis for Mr. Kendrick's phone on January the 10th, 2015.
I was without records to analyze for Mr. Kendrick's phone.
Okay, so you have no records of his phone on that date, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
I would like to ask a question, Chair.
All right.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. How are you, sir?
I'm okay. How you doing, sir?
Very well, thank you.
I'll actually let you know if I'm okay. Can I ask you some questions?
Well, yes, please.
Thank you. So, I want to just
There's
go
no
into
sense in bringing
a few different topics.
Get it all in one time and be done with it. Do a day and a half, 2 days. Get all the testimony you need to be done with it.
The way this was set up in your office, and you specifically work in this case, I think you made it clear. I'm going to be very brief, but if I'm wrong, just say I got it wrong. Law enforcement officers with whomever, FBI, APD, GBI, whomever is working the case, eventually your office may get involved and summon or they give to you their work product or their files on the case. Fair to say?
That's fair to say, yes.
And then what you're doing is, because you're a law enforcement, but you're the arm of the attorneys who come to court, you have to look at everything and prepare it or not prepare it for any type of charges.
That's right.
All right. And when I say charge, I mean formal charge. I know, ladies and gentlemen, know police can issue warrants, but warrants aren't an official charging document. That would be an accusation or a bill of indictment.
Yes.
When you got, and I'm focused only on this case, obviously, okay? When you get the file, you're getting the files from everybody who touched the case, as far as you could tell, from crime labs, from law enforcement, APD, GBI, whomever. I'm not eliminating, I'm not trying to keep out other agencies, but you try to get all those files together.
Well, yeah, I try to get all the documents or whatever media that every agency that investigated the case has. I mean, I want to get as much as possible.
Sure. Now, when you get the APD files, Atlanta Police Department files, and you start looking at them and reviewing them, I want to ask you if you can remember. Do you remember any notation from Detective Thorpe that he reviewed the McDonald's surveillance video from January 10th, evening January 10th, 2015, and he did that on or about January 11th or January 12th, 2015?
I don't, and I feel like I would remember that.
Tell the jurors why you remember that, if you don't mind.
Well, the McDonald's, as they've heard, was the McDonald's at Old Hayville and Cleveland Avenue.
151 Cleveland Avenue?
Yeah, I think that's the address. Whatever, it's at the intersection, at or near the intersection of yes, I believe that's the address. What you just said, and that was said to be a rendezvous point, the parking lot of which. So I would have remembered I would have remembered it because, first of all, I've never seen that video. I've never seen any surveillance video from McDonald's. So if I were to read something that said from a law enforcement officer said they did review it, I would have said, well, I would have remembered. That would have been a big thing for me. I would want to have had the video. So no, I don't recall any notations from Detective Thorpe about him reviewing the video and not obtaining it, presumably. So no, I don't remember anything like that.
And if that video, if it's working and if it captures the area that this, what was your word, rendezvous? Is that what you just said?
I think so.
Okay. And the rendezvous, according to Mr. Copeland, let's say, it might be others, but at approximately 8 o'clock at night, January 10th, 2015, approximately.
Mm-hmm.
And you could correct me, if my times are off. If that surveillance at the McDonald's captured people actually meeting, then we would know who was actually there and if Mr. Copeland was being straightforward. Is that fair to say?
I'm gonna object to speculation.
Sustained.
Did Detective Thorpe ever tell you, besides his file, did he tell you that he went out and looked at and saw or tried to see the video from the 10th day of January 2015, approximately 8:00 p.m. from the McDonald's?
Yeah, yes, sir.
I covered this with Detective Thorpe, and I'm impeaching him.
Overruled.
I don't recall him telling me that. It doesn't mean that he didn't, but I just don't recall it. It just seems like something that would leave a mental impression on me because again, I would have just thought, well, where's the video? I don't have the video. I would have liked to know that. So I don't think he ever did.
In your experience since I believe you said 2012, but it might have been 2009, with the DA's office in Fulton County, have you looked at and subpoenaed whether or a grand jury or excuse me, a court's search warrant, surveillance video from stores?
I have, yeah.
Have you found that after a certain period of time, some of the video is erased or deleted?
Yes, that's the practice. Videos are all digital. I don't want to say they're all digital. There may still be people using tapes, but every video I've ever seen has been digital, and they only have so much room on the computer system that's storing the video, and eventually will start overwriting itself.
Explain, first of all, this includes 2015?
Yes.
Okay. Tell the jurors what you mean. I know you're comfortable with it, but overriding itself, just explain that process from your experience, knowledge, and work with these.
Well, just like every computer surveillance system, cameras are hooked up to essentially a computer. The footage is recorded digitally and stored on a drive, some sort of media in the computer, but that drive can only store so much data, so many ones and zeros, I suppose. And so once the drive is full, the system is programmed to just, it's not like a tape where it starts in the beginning of the tape and starts overwriting it, but it starts writing data to the parts of the drive that already have data on it. And over time, the data just starts to rewrite itself. And eventually, after a certain amount of time, all traces of the footage from a certain date will eventually be gone as they've been overwritten by data from other footage.
So just putting that make it simple on a date. Have you seen a surveillance video that lasts 30 days?
I believe so. Yeah, I don't want to throw out any names, but there's one place in particular that comes to mind, but it's not relevant here, and I also don't remember exactly, but I do believe that 30 days I have seen before.
Okay. What's a typical days until it starts overriding?
I'm going to object to ask and answer and speculation about that relates to McDonald's video.
I'm impeaching Detective Thorpe.
I feel maybe 2 weeks. That's always what I kind of mark in my mind as if it's within 2 weeks of an event. I mean, you want to get the video as soon as possible, to be clear, but I really start losing hope after 2 weeks. But again, it depends on it could be a big retail outfit. Now going back to 2015, it may be a little different. Maybe they just have petabytes of storage for their video and it's stored off site. But your typical, like a gas station, particularly in 2015, where it was stored within, probably on a DVR, you're going to want to get that as soon as possible. You can start overwriting after 48 hours.
Okay. And when you say then it writes it over, so if I'm just using 2 weeks, okay?
Mm-hmm.
January 1, 2015, 2 weeks would go to approximately January 14, 2015.
Right.
On January 15, 2015, does the entirety, in your experience and your dealing with this, does the entirety of everything in those 2 weeks go away, or is it on a rolling basis?
Would you object to ask and answer on
Not of this witness.
and speculation as to this witness?
He's asking within his experience. Overruled.
Well, okay, so are we talking about one location and if we're talking about surveillance footage, one location and one computer system, or we're talking about in the entire world of surveillance footage?
McDonald's. 2015, January 10th, surveillance, just typical McDonald's, your experience, hypothetically 2 weeks. I want to know on the 15th day, so I'm just after the 2 weeks, what you're explaining to the jury, does day 1, January 1 override, or the entirety from January 1 to 2014? That's my question.
To lack of foundation at this point.
Sustained.
In your experience with a 2-week camera, does it override just 1 day at a time? As the
An
next day
objective
comes in, the first
vague.
day's gone.
Vague as to your experience to a camera in a 2-week period. Any camera? I mean,
Sustained.
When you say override, tell the jurors what you meant by that.
asked and answered.
Sustained.
I don't believe he just
Yeah, he
used the
did.
word.
He explained it in detail.
All right. Did you or any of your members of your team, I'm including the prosecution team, you understand what I'm asking?
Mhm.
So prosecution team are all law enforcement, GBI crime lab, your office, whomever, okay? FBI. Did you ever find out from any source that McDonald's, how long, if at all, they had that surveillance video?
The record retention period for surveillance video, if I knew it, I don't remember it now. So no, I can't answer. I don't know what their retention period was back then, nor do I know what it is now.
Did you ever hear from a detective, you know who Detective Gaither, Detective Dennis, they worked together, gang unit in 2015, January?
Yes, I know them.
Okay. Did they ever tell you or put in writing in any way that they went to the McDonald's in June 11, 2015 and inquired about the surveillance?
Objection, hearsay.
I am impeaching Detective Gaither's testimony.
And who are you asking about at this point?
Detective Gaither, January 11th, 2015, going to McDonald's and inquiring about the video.
And that is hearsay, and it's not impeachment unless they specifically confronted
Sustained.
Detective
I
Gaither
did confront Detective
Gaither?
Gaither.
with
Yes.
telling Mr. Sprinkle as to whether they got video surveillance footage or not.
I want to know if
was
it's
not
in,
the comment.
I want to know if it's in his
Detective Gaither
records.
was not confronted with that.
Okay, sustained.
I want to know if it's in the records.
That wouldn't be, then that would, rephrase your question. That question, the objection is sustained.
Do you have any information from any source that you looked at in your records, conversations that Detective Gaither and or Detective Dennis went to the McDonald's on the day after interviewing Kenneth Copeland, June 11, 2015, and inquired about their surveillance equipment?
No, I have no notes that indicate that, and I have no memory of any conversations that I had with them where they told me that they did.
Did you ever obtain personally or have a member of your team, or it was done before you got involved, Sky House, you know, the condominium that Mr. Williams was living at in January 2015?
Yes.
Okay. Any surveillance from there?
No.
How about the Green Store? Any surveillance at the Green Store that Kenneth Copeland states that he was there, personally there, at and around the time of the killing of Donovan Thomas? Any surveillance from there?
No, no surveillance.
Did you or members of the prosecution team, I'm including all law enforcement, ever interview the people or persons that Kenneth Copeland said in June 10th, 2015 that he was with at the Green Store at the time around Mr. Donovan Thomas's murder?
Well, there's a little Rick that he mentioned, if I remember correctly. No, I didn't, nor do I know if law enforcement did. No.
How many cell phones did Kenneth Copeland have access to that he can use on January 10th, 2015?
All I know of is the one that I testified to.
And you do know that Kenneth Copeland testified in this court, and if you don't know, just say I don't know, that he had multiple cell phones.
I'm going to object at the rule of
I
sequestration.
mean, I would hope he doesn't know.
Okay.
Since he's a
Do you
witness in this case.
have knowledge that Mr. Copeland did not have 2 or more cell phones on January 10th, 2015 through your investigation?
Asked and answered. He just answered that question that he only knew of the one cell phone.
Sustained.
Let me ask you this. Phone records that you talked about at length with the Honorable Mr. Body, through your analysis, and what you were given and subpoenaed more phone records, fair to say?
Yes.
All right. those phone records give a general whereabout of where a handset is located, if it's working properly, if the records are accurate, I'm assuming all that, where a phone set would be in relation to a cell phone tower. Is that fair to say?
Right, just the area that the approximate area that the phone would be located based on the tower that it utilized.
And in your experience, if you know, and if you don't know, just say, I don't want to testify to this. That area could be how many miles, how many feet, do you know? And we're talking about Atlanta, January 2015. And please, I'm not trying to put you out on a limb. I know you're under oath.
Well, I don't know that anybody could testify as to the exact square footage of the area, but it suffices to say it's not like GPS. It's a large area, probably, you know, like over a mile.
Could be multiple miles.
Could be.
And jurors may not understand what you meant by it's not like GPS. Just explain that.
Well, you know, like a point on a map. Like, in other words, when you get phone records, you don't have a log of the exact locations of a cellular device, you know, like a pinpoint that you could put on the map that the phone was right here. Like, for example, I have a phone on me. If you were to get my phone records, it wouldn't show my phone sitting right here in the witness stand. It would show that it was using the tower next to the courthouse or near the courthouse, down the street, wherever, but it's not exactly.
Now, are you aware from your review of your records as you've been testifying and the recordings that Kenneth Copeland met with Detective Thorpe, Homicide Detective Thorpe, on the early morning hours of January 11, 2015?
Yes, I do recall Kenneth Copeland traveled to the precinct or arrived at the precinct and spoke with Detective Thorpe, yes.
And did you remember seeing that video? Did you ever watch that, and do you have a memory of that video encounter?
I believe so. It's been a while. I don't recall that video being all that important to me. I remember summarizing it, so I must have watched it, yes.
Do you remember Kenneth Copeland had a cell phone on the desk when he was speaking with Detective Thorpe?
That I don't remember. I'd have to take a look at the video.
Well, the jurors have seen it, so we're good. Do you remember Kenneth Copeland explaining that he knew that cell phones can give an area on January 11, 2015, explaining to Detective Thorpe that he was aware that check the cell phone records, check the cell phone, it'll show it's in this area. Do you remember him saying that?
I remember somebody saying that during the, I can't say that I remember if it was him, though.
All right. Let me ask you this. The cell phone records that we have here, unfortunately, don't give the actual communication. They might say handset of Kenneth Copeland, speaks with a handset of Natasha Williams, but we don't know what's being said according to these records. Fair to say?
That's correct.
Now, with regards to Nyesha Williams, Nyisha Williams, typical
Yes.
spelling. Do you know that person?
I do not.
Okay. Do you remember seeking and obtaining and subpoenaing cellular telephone records for Nyesha Williams?
I do remember doing that.
And do you remember why you did that?
They appeared in the, there was a number that appeared in Kenneth Copeland's cell phone records that evening. And when I say that evening, I mean the evening of January 10th, 2015. And specifically, so I'm clear here, it was 404-621-0102. I'm looking at Kenneth Copeland's records to refresh my recollection. And because of the times that there were phone calls sent or transmitted and received by that number, I thought it was relevant. So I subpoenaed both the call logs and the subscriber information. The subscriber information was the name of Nyesha Williams.
And sometimes people can, and there's nothing wrong with it, people can use a cell phone that's not registered in their name for various reasons. Is that fair to say?
It's very fair to say. It happens all the time.
So Nyesha Williams, I'm just using that name since we're using it. She could be on the Verizon call as a registered person, but she can freely give me her cell phone and I could use it all the time.
That's right.
But it would come back if somebody like you subpoenaed it, it would look like it's Naisha Williams' call. In the name doesn't mean she's using the phone.
That's right.
And you, through your research, took Kenneth Copeland's statements on June 10th, 2015. And when he said he called Mr. Garlington, you wanted to know what number Mr. Garlington was using then. Is that fair to say?
That's fair to say.
And through your deduction, whether it's right or wrong, you said the Naisha Williams registered phone might have been in the custody, control, and use of Demeke and Garlington.
It's possible, but I do not know.
I'm not saying anyone knows, but that was your deduction.
That's right.
That's why you then targeted the jail records for Naisha Williams' registered phone, because you thought it may relate to Mr. Garlington.
Do you mean the cell phone records for her phone?
Did I say that?
I think you said jail records, but yes, I obtained the cell phone records for
I
her
said
phone.
jail record. I meant cell phone record.
Yes.
Okay. Now, when you obtained those records, you specifically did not request, you testified to this before, you specifically did not request historical cell site location data for Naisha Williams' phone.
That's correct.
And what that means to the jurors who may know what it is, but don't, that means you don't get the longitude and latitude of which tower that phone is employing at the time of the handset speaking with the cell tower, then it goes to the switching station.
That's essentially right. You just get a log of incoming and outgoing calls, the times, the numbers, but the columns that tell you the location of the tower that was utilized, you don't get that. You need a search warrant for that.
Did you ever exclude the Naisha Williams cell phone as the phone Mr. Garlington was using on the night of January 10, 2015?
Did I ever conclude that it was not his phone, or the phone that he was using, rather?
I meant the phone is using.
No, I never definitively concluded that he was or was not using that phone.
And if, as you believed or hunched or were doing your work, Mr. Garlington was using that phone registered to Naisha Williams, then you can track at least what calls were being made at what times. Is that fair to say?
All right, go ahead. You can answer.
You mean I can at least see the phone,
Yes.
like the list of calls that were sent and received, text messages sent and received by the phone, the
True.
handset?
Yes.
Yes, I believe I obtained those records.
All right. Now, Mr. Copeland stated on June 10th, 2015, from the McDonald's, that he was in his car at some point, along with Mr. Garlington and along with Mr. McMullen, Demise McMullen's, also known as Nard.
If I remember correctly, I think you said it was his brother, Rontrez Brock's Dodge Charger. But yes, all three of them were at the McDonald's in that car, a car that he had possession of. Kenneth Copeland did, that is.
Okay. And Kenneth Copeland said that I'm not saying it's true, but Kenneth Copeland said on June 10, 2015, he left the McDonald's. I'm using 8 o'clock. If I'm wrong, just correct my time, but approximately 8 o'clock. He was driving the vehicle, the Charger, along with Mr. Garlington in the front passenger seat and Mr. McMullen or Nard in the rear driver's seat.
That sounds right, yeah. I don't recall what the exact seating arrangement was, but the occupants of the vehicle, that sounds correct.
And then he has that car, the Charger, going up, following another vehicle, a Nitro, white Nitro, to around Jeffery Williams' Sky House condo.
That's what he said.
And did you look, when analyzing the calls from Naisha Williams, records rather, from Naisha Williams, and realize that during that relevant period of time on the supposed drive from the McDonald's to the Sky House, the Naisha Williams call that's potentially with Mr. Garlington and the Mr. McMullen calls, the number associated with Mr. McMullen, were in communication with each other?
Are you asking me, did Mr. McMullen and or the phone subscribed to by somebody named Naisha Williams communicate?
At the relevant time of when supposedly Mr. Copeland is driving them together in the same car to the Sky House? Yes, that's my question.
I don't recall. I do recall Mr. McMullen was a very frequently contacted number within the Naisha Williams phone records. I don't work, but I don't have, well, I do have Mr. McMullen. Let me see.
If you could check it, I'd appreciate it. And just tell the jurors whether at the time they're supposedly in the same exact car, these two phone numbers of the Naisha Williams and the Mr. McMullen are communicating together according to phone records.
Okay, so we have, what,
Can you use what exhibit you're using?
Is that an exhibit or
It's already in evidence.
does he know what exhibit number it is?
Do you have an exhibit number? Are you looking at an actual?
I think he may, well, y'all can clarify it, but is there an exhibit number on what you're looking at?
no, I just brought the phone, I printed them out and brought them to court.
This
so
is, what is it that you're looking at?
the phone records for 470-217-6080, Demise McMullen.
Okay, does anybody know what exhibit number that is?
Yes, 464Y.
Thank you.
Mr. Steele requested it during my direct.
Okay.
I didn't want it during his cross as well.
Okay, so what I see here is at 7:59 p.m. on January 10th, 2015.
Just do me a favor, because you're looking down. Can you just go a little slower?
Yes, yes. What I see.
Actually, let me stop. How much longer is your examination of this witness going to be?
45 minutes.
All right, let's stop and break for lunch.
To an hour and a half, because I don't want to.
All right, I'll see y'all back at, let's be back at 1:45.
1:45 is when we'll come back.
Thank you, Your Honor.
You edit this. All right, it's break time, folks. We are home break at 1:45 p.m. We're going to reboot here in a little bit and get things going, but we will be back for part 2 before 1:45. The Outcast Podcast coming to you live on YouTube and Twitch. We'll see you back here about 1:30. I'll go back live.
All right, unless there's anything we need to take up, I'll see everybody back at 1:45.
All right. I'll see y'all guys back here at 1:30. Outcast Podcast, YouTube, Twitch.